In the news tonight, His Majesty the King leaves Amman for the US on a several-day working visit, during which he holds talks with the US President and meets with US congressional leaders. In Cairo, supporters and opponents of the Muslim Brotherhood clash following a protest called by a brotherhood demanding reforms of Egypt's judiciary. And US police kills one suspect in the Boston Marathon bombing during a shootout and is engaged in house-to-house search for the second man after a bloody night in the city's streets. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news, and next are the details. His Majesty the King and Her Majesty Queen Rania left Amman for a working visit in the United States. His Majesty will hold a summit meeting with US President Barack Obama on the 26th of this month on bilateral ties as well as latest developments in the Middle East. The visit is part of continued coordination and consultation between the two leaders on regional developments, mainly the repercussions of the Syrian crisis on the kingdom. The talks will address the growing burdens on Jordan as a result of hosting about 500,000 Syrian refugees. Discussions will also deal with efforts to achieve Mideast peace according to the two-state solution. King Abdullah will meet with senior US administration officials and heads of congressional committees, as well as Arab and Muslim community leaders. He will also attend part of the Jordanian US Business Council meeting in Washington. His Royal Highness Prince Faisal bin Hussein was sworn in as regent during the King's absence. Several cities across the kingdom saw peaceful protests and sit-ins organized by political and popular groups demanding reforms and urging for combating corruption and holding corrupt officials accountable. Demonstrators also protested a hike in prices and called for the independence of the judiciary. And in Amman, members of the Muslim Brotherhood, joined by other youths, demonstrated against corruption and demanded economic and political reforms. The protesters gathered after Friday prayers at Al-Hussein Mosque and marched to the Palm Square. They demanded legal measures against corrupt officials. The protest included a parade by armed youth members of the Muslim Brotherhood. Over to Syria, where shelling continues in Damascus and Aleppo. Videos uploaded to the internet showed buildings shaking and men sifting through rubble to find any alive or dead people in the two cities. Syria's opposition said it hopes their international backers meeting in Istanbul tomorrow will give teeth to a tacit agreement that arming rebel groups is the best way to end the result or the rule of President Bashar al-Assad. A senior Syrian opposition source who took part in preliminary meetings in Istanbul before the conference said that tomorrow would be a turning point. In their last conference in Rome, friends of Syria, including the United States, European and Arab nations, did not offer weapons to the opposition in what reflects their alarm at the rise of radical Islamist groups like the Nusra Front in the insurgent ranks. Meanwhile, UN Arab League mediator in the Syria conflict, al-Ibrahimi, dismissed rumors he was resigning due to frustration with the Arab League and the Security Council's inaction, but said he considers departing on a daily basis. He also dismissed reports that he agreed to remain in the post for 3 months, for more 3 months. Brahimi met with the UN Security Council today behind closed doors. Diplomats present said he offered another bleak assessment of the Syrian situation. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon made clear last Wednesday that he wanted Ibrahimi to continue working as a joint representative of both the Arab League and the United Nations. Brahimi will be meeting with Ban Ki-moon and Arab League Chief Nabil al-Arabi in New York this coming Monday. In Cairo, supporters and opponents of the Muslim Brotherhood threw stones and Molotov cocktails at each other during clashes. The clashes erupted following an earlier protest called by the Muslim Brotherhood demanding reforms of Egypt's judiciary. Thousands of demonstrators had gathered outside the High Court in Cairo and called for the dismissal of judges who they say are corrupt holdovers from the ousted regime of Hosni Mubarak. Many secular parties have also been angered by the fact that the judiciary has issued very few convictions in the trials of security personnel accused of killing protesters during and after the revolution. The demonstrations come ahead of an expected ruling by the Supreme Constitutional Court on Sunday on an appeal against a delay in parliamentary elections. The judiciary authority is the one branch which is still exactly the same as it was before and after the revolution, meaning the spearhead of those fighting against the revolution are the judges. This is proven by the fact that everyone tried for killing protesters from the start of the revolution until now has been found innocent. And in Iraq, a day before local elections, at least 8 people were killed in mortar rounds targeting a Sunni mosque and a bomb explosion inside a Shiite mosque. Police said mortar rounds landed outside a Sunni mosque in a village near Khala's town during Friday prayers, killing 7 people and wounding a dozen more. Elsewhere, a bomb placed inside a Shiite mosque in Kirkuk, north of the capital, also killed 1 and wounded 12 more just worshippers were leaving. Meanwhile, mourners gathered outside a hospital morgue in Baghdad to collect the bodies of victims killed in a suicide bomb attack late yesterday. The bomber blew himself up inside a Baghdad cafe popular with young people, killing at least 27 and wounding dozens more. Security officials have been expecting more attacks before tomorrow's ballot for provincial councils, viewed as a measure of the country's political stability. Finance leaders of the G20 economy said they agreed they did not need to set hard targets for reducing national level or debt levels and would be watching for negative effects from massive monetary stimulus efforts such as Japan. Russian Finance Minister Anton Silanov said at a news conference that finance officials believe overall debt reduction was more important than specific figures. The G20 discussions in Washington were dominated by talk of the struggling Eurozone, where harsh austerity measures have failed to lift the region out of its economic slumber. In a communique released after a 2-day meeting, the group said it would be mindful of possible side effects of extended periods of monetary stimulus. Police killed 1 suspect in the Boston Marathon bombing during a shootout and are engaged in a house-to-house search for the 2nd man in the Boston suburb of Watertown after a bloody night of shooting and explosions in the city's streets. During the night, an MIT University police officer was killed, a transit police officer was wounded, and the suspects carjacked a vehicle before leading police on a chase that ended with 1 suspect shot dead. Police said the suspect they were seeking was the man shown wearing a white cap in surveillance pictures released last night and taken shortly before Monday's explosions. The suspects were believed to be brothers Johar Tsaranev, 19, and 26-year-old Tamerlan Tsaranev from Russia.
We believe these are the same individuals that were responsible for the bombing on Monday at the Boston Marathon. We believe that they're responsible for the death of an MIT police officer and the shooting of an MBTA police officer. This is a very serious situation that we're dealing with.
Meanwhile, White House officials said U.S. President Barack Obama was briefed overnight by a counter-terrorism aide on the Boston bombing investigation and manhunt. Officials say as police had closed in on the 2 men overnight, they attacked the officers with explosives and gunfire before one of them was shot and taken to a hospital where he died. This report has more on the overnight manhunt.
Sounds of gunfire fill this amateur video, purportedly capturing a police shootout in Boston. The video, which cannot be independently verified by Reuters, was posted online Friday as police conduct a manhunt for suspects in the Boston Marathon bombing. Police killed 1 suspect in a shootout in the early hours of Friday and are searching the suburb of Watertown for the 2nd.
There's a 20-block perimeter around the location the Chief DeVoe just talked about.
We are concerned about securing that area and making sure that this individual is taken into custody. We believe this to be a terrorist. We believe this to be a man who's come here to kill people.
Police said they were going door to door in pursuit of the man known as Suspect 2, who was photographed in a white hat just before the explosions Monday.
Remain in your homes. As the Colonel said, we're going to be doing a search. Please stay in your homes. Do not come out.
A doctor at the Boston hospital that received the dead suspect said he had multiple gunshot wounds and injuries from an apparent explosion.
How many gunshot wounds?
Unable to count.
Multiple gunshot wounds?
Yes.
And the other, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the rest of that.
And probably a blast injury also.
Blast meaning what?
An explosive device, possibly shrapnel, thermal injury.
Can you describe where it was?
It was pretty much throughout the trunk. It was multiple wounds.
The twin explosions caused panic at the finish line of the Boston Marathon Monday, when the blast killed 3 people and injured 176.
Over to Pakistan. A Pakistani judge ordered house arrest to former President and Army Chief Pervez Musharraf. Police escorted Musharraf from the courtroom to his residence on the edge of Islamabad, where he must remain for 2 days ahead of a hearing over allegations of illegally detaining judges during a crackdown on the judiciary in 2007. The judge ordered the case be heard in the anti-terrorism court on the grounds that detaining judges could be considered an attack on the state. Musharraf's lawyer said a rejection of a bail is the first in the 65 years of judicial history of Pakistan.
Now the case is that he has been arrested and his house has been declared as sub-jail, and he has committed himself to the judicial process and to the majesty of justice.
The provocative threats from North Korea over the last few months has forced the US and China to work together. China's Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Affairs will pay a visit to the United States next week to discuss peace and stability in the Korean Peninsula. According to UN scientists, the North would need at least 1 more nuclear test in order to develop a nuclear missile. More with Lu'ay Balkar.
South Korea called for a stronger international stance against North Korea's nuclear threats after Pyongyang said it will not be returning to the negotiating table with the United States. South Korea's unification and foreign ministers held meetings with the ambassadors of Japan and China to Seoul and discussed North Korea's nuclear ambitions. The meetings came despite Japan's strained relations with China and South Korea over territorial disputes, but both countries sought ways to easing tensions across the peninsula. Japan has deployed Patriot advanced capability missile interceptors as a defensive measure against any future attack. Tension has been fueled by North Korean anger over the imposition of UN sanctions after its last nuclear arms test in February. The Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe criticized North Korea's recent provocations as the country has deployed missile defense systems as tensions with North over its possible missile launches stretched in 2 weeks.
We're completely committed to protecting the lives and property of our citizens. We must make North Korea realize that these provocative acts will not only no longer help it, but will only make its situation worse.
North Korea threatened the South with retaliatory blows if South Korea failed to stop insulting its leaders. But South Korea's defense ministry was unfazed and said it did not believe the North was ready for an all-out war with the US-backed South. NATO Chief Anders Fogh Rasmussen urged North Korea to refrain from further provocations and turn to the negotiation table instead.
I urge North Korea to refrain from any further provocations and to fulfill its international obligations to fully implement all relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions. And I commended all efforts to seek peaceful solutions through dialogue.
After returning from a visit to Japan and South Korea, Rasmussen called North Korea's nuclear test a serious threat to international peace, while the United States has offered talks, but only on the precondition that they lead to North Korea abandoning its nuclear weapons ambitions. Lu'ay Balkar for the news at 10.
Over to the world of style, and Fashion Rio Day 3 covered a wide spectrum yesterday as some of Brazil's most talented designers tested the industry's limits. One of the day's most anticipated shows, Alexander Herkovich's newest collection, transported the crowd to a gritty urban landscape. The collection was full of washed-out denim looks and leather, creating an almost industrial feel, but appreciated by the younger generation hungry for an edgy look. Today will be Fashion Rio's final and triumphant day, wrapping a 5-day show that is showcasing 25 of Brazil's hottest names in design, old and new. Real Madrid coach Jose Mourinho refrained from committing himself to the club beyond the end of this season and said a decision on his future would be taken at the end of the current campaign. Mourinho joined the royal team coming from Inter Milan in 2010, and he has been linked with a move to wealthy clubs, including another of his former teams, Chelsea and Paris Saint-Germain. In a press conference held today, Jose Mourinho said Real should focus on winning trophies and the right decision for everybody will be taken after the end of this season.
Objetivo inmediato.
Our immediate goal is to try to win tomorrow, to try to reach the Champions League's final. There remain 2 matches to be played in a week. Then we have to try to win the Spanish Cup final. At the end of the season, we will decide what is best for everybody.
Decidir lo que sea mejor para todos.
8 times champion Rafael Nadal has made it to the Monte Carlo Masters semi-finals after beating Bulgarian Grigor Dimitrov 6-2, 2-6, 6-4. With this win, Nadal clinched his 45th successive victory at the first big clay court event of the season. And in the same tournament, Frenchman Jo-Wilfried Tsonga beat Swiss Stanislas Wawrinka 2-6, 6-3, 6-4. The Frenchman, who reached the last 4 for the first time, will face Nadal in the semi-finals. And finally, a look at the weather. Partly cloudy and cold tonight, with possible showers in the northern regions. Another drop in temperatures is expected tomorrow, creating partly cloudy and cold conditions with continued chance for thunderstorms, accompanied by hail in the northern and central regions. Winds will be westerly brisk, blowing dust in the desert areas. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect moderate conditions tomorrow, with northerly moderate to brisk winds and calm seas. The weatherman cautions of poor visibility in the hilly areas due to low-lying clouds and the Badia regions due to dust. Caution is also advised for possible floods and slippery conditions. Here are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. Now, a reminder of our top stories. His Majesty the King leaves Amman for the US on a several-day working visit, during which he holds talks with the US President and meets with US congressional leaders. In Cairo, supporters and opponents of the Muslim Brotherhood clash following a protest called by a Brotherhood demanding reforms of Egypt's judiciary. And US police kills 1 suspect in the Boston Marathon bombing during a shootout and is engaged in a house-to-house search for the 2nd man after a bloody night in the city's streets. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Ra'ad Labtoush. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.